Welcome to the Real Triathlon Podcast. I'm your host, Garrick Lowen, here with Nicholas Chase and Jackson Laundry.
Lesley, holy freaking crap. I haven't seen you in a while. It's been probably a month or so. And
Yeah, it's good to
yeah,
see you. Halfway
yeah.
through a screen.
I know. I wish you were coming to St. George half distance here in this weekend, so in racing again.
I do too. I wish that race could go well for me ever. And but that's just not why I'm not doing it, because it would be nice to be there with you guys. But it just, yeah, doing a 70.3 the weekend after an Ironman would be not my thing.
I don't think that exists.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really why I wanted you to come on. You were part of the first ever Ironman Pro Series full distance race at Texas this past weekend. And of
Yep.
course, all the lead in and everything was like races getting sold out for pro athletes. No one could get in. You had set this as like a race you wanted to do early on though, right?
Yes. Yeah, I did. And I for a little bit debated maybe trying to do a race before it, but just with the winter and some life stuff, it just kind of ended up, making sense for me to do it as the first race. And honestly, I had a lot of nerves going into it. I've been doing triathlon long enough that I don't necessarily get nervous. It's really hard to explain. I don't necessarily get nervous about the actual race because once the gun goes off, I'm like, Joel, let's just see how this goes. I've done it enough to know you never know what's going to happen, all this. But I was pretty nervous, like just kind of I hadn't done the distance in a very long time. I had a complete body meltdown the last time I did the distance in heat and humidity. Just all the little things like the race logistics and and how important the nutrition is in an Ironman. And I knew I needed to improve that. So there were just a ton of little details I don't know if the word's nervous about, but that I had on my mind and was, was a little worried about. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how the first chunk of my 2024 has been triathlon wise.
No, I think that's great because it opens up a couple other questions that I wanted to dig into in terms of like it looked like there was a lot of attrition out there for a lot of athletes who just had a tough day or
Yeah.
faded really hard in the later steps of it. And in Coeur d'Alene, you were running really well. And I think what was it, top 5 or 6 or maybe top 3?
It, you mean Des Moines in
Oh
2020?
yeah, sorry, it was Des
Yeah,
Moines.
I think I was about to be in second
Yeah.
and I just had such a terrible experience. I could just feel like nothing I'd had before. I had had another DNF at Kona in the past, but where my body just completely shut down. But since then, I had been fine in humidity and everything. I'm going way back now. But then, yeah, in Des Moines in 2022, just super hot, really high humidity. And it was a weird feeling to just I had a bloated stomach. My stomach was sloshing. I could kind of tell I wasn't digesting anything. Nothing was going through. And just kind of slowly feeling my body and even weirder, my mind shutting down, and just having to stop, in short. And that really, that was really on my mind before this race. Cause I'm like, you know what? There's different levels of goals I set for myself in races, like lower level goals, higher level goals. And for this one, I'm like, if I can improve upon my nutrition and not have that happen again, that's my first and foremost priority. And, I did that. Now I
Yeah.
had moments during the run, not to skip ahead already to the run, but when you talk about the attrition, it really was on the run where I think the humidity was over 85%. Luckily the sun was just off and on because I think adding a strong UV index to
Mm.
that equation would have made it even worse for everyone in the race. But I started feeling that feeling off and on a few times after about 10 miles into the run and was like, oh no, is this happening again? But then I would come out of it and it was like, it was up and down the whole time, but I made it through. And so I did something better and I did something right with the nutrition, versus in previous experiences. So I was happy with that.
Yeah, let's rewind a little bit in terms of what you'd been dealing with leading into the race. Like, had things been going smoothly, at least with training? It was very cold and snowy in Boulder. It
Yeah.
was very tough to probably simulate a lot of what you might have wanted to experience on race day. So I guess specifically, how was your training environment beforehand that supported this race? And then also, what were the big nutritional or even small nutritional changes you've made based off of your experiences prior to this?
Right. So yeah, those are great questions. So as far as the environment that I was in, yeah, Boulder, it's not like a crazy, growing up in the Midwest, it's not like it was like and I never a crazy winter, but it does last a long time off and on. It never gets super hot. It's definitely not like Texas and dealing with some snow. So, I mean, I did a sauna, pretty typical sauna protocol, the 9 to 10 days before travel, where I just tried to go in a sauna, either the red light sauna or dry sauna, get to the point where I was super sweaty, 20, 30 minutes after my last workout of the day. But, that better than nothing, but that only does so much. So I just accepted that that's all I could do. For the most part, I didn't have plans to go acclimate there or anything, because then I have to consider also that I live at altitude. So again, it was just kind of choosing, with the options I had, the best route. So I did that, and perhaps that helped a little bit. My training was pretty consistent. I don't think I did anything super epic. Honestly, I didn't do a lot of super long nor frequent long bike and run sessions.
What were kind of the longest bike, run, or brick?
I did 2 2-hour easy runs and one like 2:20-ish, 2:15 hour run, where I did do some race pace, and that one was a little bit more up tempo. And then, I mean, I only did 2 solid 5-hour rides, which, and maybe one 4-hour ride. And I honestly, and again, not, I'm jumping around all over here, but I don't think doing more longer sessions, I agree with I don't think doing more longer sessions nor harder sessions longer really would have made an improvement in the race. Fitness wise, I felt pretty good. So I was a little low on the swimming volume. I had some trouble getting in. I think I was like probably a few K under every week of what I should be doing, but got some good quality in. So I would say, spotty here and there, but pretty overall pretty good. And I felt pretty healthy and tried to take care of myself and all that. And then as far as,
Nutrition stuff.
yeah, nutrition. And then as far as so that was all good for the race. And then as far as nutrition in the race, the main thing was I had a plan on the bike and I focused on it literally the entire time. And I know maybe other people have always done that, but for me, I've always just been like, I'm gonna throw a bunch of stuff on my bike and grab water at the aid stations and just fuel and see how I feel. But this time I had a very strict plan, and I was a little short on the carbs, but not much. I did, some people are doing super high carb now. I definitely bumped it up from what I've done in the past. And I'm pretty sure yeah, I felt the best I ever had the last hour of an Ironman on the bike. And I felt my legs coming off the bike felt freakishly good. Maybe they just felt really bad in the past. So that's why I'm a little disappointed. I had issues with the humidity and like I said, the ups and downs on the run, but a huge positive was my if and when I do this distance again, I know I have a better plan to feel good coming off the bike. And that was huge for me. So that's a positive I'm trying to focus on.
Do you know like quantifiable how much more you took in versus what you did before in terms of carbohydrates and sodium or just general liquids?
Yes. Oh, and sorry, I should say it's not even just that I took in more. It's that, because it wasn't that much more. Very important thing that I would like, PSA for everyone. And the key, I think, for me was sticking to the plan as it pertained to even amounts of fluid, sodium, and carbs together the whole time. Because I believe in the past, I've just been like, oh, I'm going to put down 80 to 100 carbs real quick while I have time. And then, oh, yeah, I need to get some sodium and some fluid. But it was just always all over the place. And I just kind of was going for totals. Whereas this, I really kept it steady carbs, steady fluid, steady sodium. And I think that was so much better on my digestion.
Yeah.
Um,
Any
so
protein?
I didn't do any protein. I did branched chain amino acids, the morning of, like I normally do. But that's a great question. I would like to incorporate that perhaps in the future if I do this distance again. Um, you know, not,
You will. You're like, if I don't know if it's gonna happen, you'll be back.
yeah, it's a little fresh to be, yeah. Everyone knows that feeling, who's done it. But so I will say the timing of everything was the key. And I will say, I mean, I think I got in like I was aiming for 85 to 90 carbs an hour. I think I got in, if I did the math after, I was a little short, so it was maybe more around 80 plus a little per hour. And that's more than I've done in the past. I mean, I know maybe other people, I mean, I know people should say I need to work up from that. And maybe I do, but honestly, I felt good. If we just isolate the bike, I feel like it was good for that. And then fluid, I was aiming for around 30 ounces an hour. And so what I did is I knew how many ounces the bottles were at the aid station. I just knew I had to get 3 to 4 more bottles and versus what I started with on my bike. And then I brought Precision Fuel and Hydration sodium, the tablets that they have. I wrapped in a couple of them in tin foil and had them just on the bike because I didn't want to deal with should I grab Gatorade or electrolytes from the course. I only grabbed water from the course so that I knew I was sticking to my plan. And again, maybe other people always do this, but I was just proud of myself I focused on it the entire time and it was a step in the right direction for me as an athlete. So,
I agree.
focused on it more than usual. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I think even having coached tons of athletes through multiple distances, I've noticed that, thinking of yourself as being an IV drip all the time
Yes.
has been kind of a good way to think about how to fuel through these long days, especially full distance day where the
Yep.
hours just keep on ticking by. And before you know it, you're like, shit, I've been racing for about 6 hours and I still got a little bit more to go.
No, totally. And I think a good kind of to simplify what I said is I think if you go the thing of you have the three components, right? Of fluid, electrolytes, and carbs. Never do, especially in a full, never do a ton of one of those items at once without at least some of the other. I think if you kind of stick to that. And then also another thing that I did differently, and I talked to Chris at Precision Fuel and Hydration before the race about this, is I'm kind of sensitive to caffeine, but I want caffeine. It's especially sensitive to it in the heat, but I want some to give me a little boost. So what I did with that, per his suggestion, is instead of doing the big bouts of caffeine and like I think a lot of people do, I did a little more slow drip IV with that as well. I never took in more than 50 milligrams at a time and I spread it out. And that's one thing I think I will implement in the future as well.
Was that through gels or through pills?
So it was through the precision gels, the
The 100,
100.
yeah.
So what I did is and it was easy because having 101 gel, it took up less space on my bike. So I just did to where I wouldn't take the full gel. I would just
Yeah.
take half.
That's awesome. I think we're all kind of exploring still, like, well, what can our bodies take? And I think even, Lesley, you're a powerful, small stature gal. Like, I don't know how much more the body can like absorb once we still get there. But I mean, we're seeing crazy things happen. For 80
Right.
grams for you is it's pretty awesome.
Right. Right. And I know I had talked to my coach about, and again, I'm not going to get into the science or details because he knows that more, but from bike testing I've done in the past, it's kind of like what I'm going through at my race pace or like sorry, power wise on the bike, you can know because everyone's burning the same amount of kilocalories or whatever on the bike. So yes, it matters what percentage of that is carbohydrates. But as far as for my weight and from numbers on my bike testing, around 85 should still give me even a little surplus. But then that's affected by how much then you're riding over threshold or surging
Mhm.
you're doing, because once you get above a certain point, you're just burning through more carbs exponentially. And so from my understanding, you want to have a surplus, but not so much of a surplus that you haven't practiced being able to digest it.
Yeah, and no matter what, we all have to remember we'll never be able to replenish what we're burning. Never.
Yes.
Like there's always
Yes.
going to be a deficit, but you're just trying to maintain some sort of equilibrium to where you don't hit hypoglycemia, bonk, or whatever. See Elvis on the side of the road. So I think that's awesome. I mean, more athletes are benefiting from more carbs and multiple sources of carbs. And so I do a lot of sodium analysis testing. And when
Yep.
people see like, holy crap, if I lose a liter of sweat, I lose 1,200 milligrams of sodium. Then that's another part of the equation. Cause then you have to sometimes condense your carbs and your electrolytes into more of a concentrated dose. And then you got to figure out
Yep,
how to space that out. So it's a that's
totally.
probably the biggest, frontier where why all these nutrition companies are making so much cash, because it's like the big unknown of nutrition. But clearly it worked for you.
Totally. And I don't know if you agree, but I think even the kind of like attitude or narrative overall in the sport, especially for full Ironman or long course racing, over the past even 2 years has changed. Where I feel like before it was more like you were scientific about it, but it was like, oh, well, just get in enough and make sure you feel good and all that. Whereas now I think people are just dialing it in more and more. And like you said, with the sodium composition testing, to actually know that number, I think is eye-opening for a lot of people.
And
And
then
doing sweat rate testing as well.
blood lactate testing, VO2 max testing, it'll show you. Like for me, I know if I'm running 315 watts consistently race pace, I'm burning at a rate of carbohydrate based off of my blood lactate levels in my blood. I'm probably over burning. So I can't sustain it and keep fueling. So that's where those tests add even more value.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's where if you did blood lactate stuff, you'd even be like, well, if I rode 250 watts, then I'm at risk of going too hard for an Ironman. 230 is perfect.
Yes, exactly. Because that's the thing. It's not just about if you override in a triathlon or you burn too many matches doing surges, it's not just about like, oh, now my legs are tired or my muscles tired. It also, you have to think about then what you're burning through as far as like your glycogen
Yeah.
stores and then for later on in the race, other than just muscular fatigue for sure.
And the heat's going to add an exponential level. But the good thing about the heat is sometimes, since it is hot, it does bring you down a little bit. So maybe you would have
Yeah.
raced, if it's 60 degrees, you might have been pushing 80% on the run. But if it's a 89-degree, 80% humidity day with full sunshine, you're going to be relegated back to 60% of your probably
Yep.
pace. So you might be conserving output, but you're still trying to maintain an internal body temperature. So the facts on
Totally.
this are, it's like we're always a big science experience on race day.
It really is. And no, you're totally right. And I've talked to a couple of athletes about it. I'm like, well, for the people who weren't able to like really dig deep because it became like, okay, you got to finish survival mode because of the conditions, maybe that's good for recovery because, you just weren't pounding your legs as much
Yeah.
on the pavement. So we'll see. I mean, I'm hobbling around, but I kind of expected it to be worse. So,
Yeah. And so you finished, you held on to 10th,
yeah.
you ran your way up and you biked your way up. I mean, you had a fight all day long. And I think that's almost some of the funnest part of racing is when you're not really on the back foot. You're like, okay, I'm maintaining. I may not be like in the top five right now, but I know that I'm still chugging into some of these other athletes who are slowing down as I'm still just maintaining. So I love that type of racing when you're
Yep.
you're able to just give the effort and you're not in super like cataclysmic, just I have to rein it back mode because of whatever.
Totally. And that's like that was my attitude all day of like just staying within my boundaries and erring on the side of caution a little bit, just kind of and I totally agree with you. It and now a couple days later, there were times during the race where I was saying to myself like, I'm never doing this again. um like the fall distance and like even the inner child in me was saying that during it. I knew that I didn't like really mean that. And I knew like now a couple days later, I'm like, and I did think this during, I was like, wow, what a crazy cool experience that is. And, the best part and why I think the sport is cool is that, the pro field, we're all out there together with everyone in the race. And what really kept me going, like you said, was that kind of working up and being smart and being like, okay, just holding on and just being out there with everyone. I even said to myself, like, you talk to yourself during these things too. I was even saying, Lesley, look at all these people who are putting one foot in front of the other and moving forward. Like, just keep doing that. Like, be out here, be with everyone else who's doing that. If you're all in it together. Like, it was this weird like camaraderie feeling, even though I was all within myself, and
Yeah.
it, I don't know if that makes sense, but it really kept me going. So,
Yeah, I always try to think of the run course like a river, and everybody has momentum moving forward throughout this turns of navigation of the course, but we're all moving in one direction, and
Yes.
this like,
Wow.
and we're all generating this like large current, and the shore is just like all the spectators and the people who they just can't even imagine getting sucked in because they're so scared of it, but we're in it.
Nick, that is some insightful thinking there. And now I'm gonna like picture that next time I race. And that's so funny what you said about the spectators, because the last mile I must have looked terrible. And I also forgot my sunglasses. So I'm really not interested in seeing pictures from the last few miles of the run. But, I must have looked so bad that probably 10 spectators within the last mile were like, "You're almost there. You just have to keep like just keep moving." So what you said about the spectators being the shore, yeah, that was really helpful too. So yeah, a very individual thing, but as you just said, it's actually not very individual when you're out there. It becomes very communal.
Yeah.
I think so.
um so you fought on, you put some really good work together, you sequenced the day out to where you got some good points, 10th place for the first full distance
Yep.
of the Pro Series race. Now I'm sure these statistics and rankings are going to change all season long because there's a
Yeah.
lot of races coming up, but that puts you on the front foot of this thing. You might be choosing some other races now based off of the success, and see like, well, I can do maybe three halves and one more full to really put yourself maybe in a total
Yep.
position of top 10. So is that something you're considering?
It is something I'm considering, and I'm giving myself kind of this week to think about it. But and talk to my coach. Uh, but it is something I'm considering. And I mean, I'll do Boulder 70.3, which is part of the series because apparently I can't not do that race because I'm just too thrifty and it's at home and I just go to it. I just migrate there every year. So I'll do that, and that's part of the series. Um and I'm qualified for 70.3 worlds. So then it's just like if and when I do another full Ironman, will doing two Ironmans be enough to be up there? How many people are going to do three? I wish people would just put it out there publicly, but I think everyone's kind of just like playing it by ear a little bit. I mean, some people have an exact plan, but I think other people are just kind of playing it by ear and seeing, okay, how does this work? Because doing three fulls in a year is a lot on the body. So, um,
Yeah, I like it. We
I think,
always set these goals when it's like convenient and we're feeling fresh. It's early, and then, oh yeah, I'll race this race in July, this in September,
yeah,
no big deal. And then in like July, after you've raced three or four times, you're like, oh man, how am I going to keep this up?
yeah, no, totally. So I think maybe I play it by ear a little too much with racing, but I think it's a balance. Like you need to have some plans and some structure and some goals, but you also have to listen to your body and not to get into this whole other topic. But for me, like hormonally, certain times of the month, there's things you can do to fight the hormonal issues. But there are just times I just feel way better.
That's
And
fair. Yeah.
I think I kind of am gonna I always say I want to kind of try to play into that as well. So lots of factors to consider, but I think what Ironman's doing with the Pro Series is cool, and it's cool to be a part of it. It was really cool to be in the top 10. Do I think some things could have gone better? Yes, but also so many things went well, and I think sometimes you just feel middle of the road about it, and
That's
that's
okay.
yeah, and that's okay. It's not either a good race or a bad race. It's combo.
It's still also like April, May timeframe. It's very, very early in the big scheme of this whole year's playing out, and people can get sick or injured at a moment's notice. So
Yes.
that 10th place could turn into a very strong position as fatigue and life happens. So you did the great job. I wanted to also ask if you wouldn't mind commenting a little on what was it like to race with race ranger at an Ironman race.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm a huge fan of that in general because I complain a lot when I see people drafting, and the reality is it is a part of this, it is a part of the sport with long course racing, and officials do give penalties, but as you know, it goes on out there, and it's I guess what I'm trying to say is both for the athletes and the officials to be fair, it can be a very subjective thing, and race rangers making it more objective because no human has a ruler in their eyes of exactly what 12 meters is. So
Yeah.
I think just trying to make it objective. I'm a huge supporter of that. Uh, I thought it was great. It was out there, and I think, there's still some kind of little things to work on. Like even in the pro meeting, they were saying, look, if you're coming up to an aid station and someone slows down real quick in front of you and you're in there and it turns red, okay, well, there's some leniency with that. Like, and there's leniency for safety. Um, but I think, one thing that plays into it a little bit is that I think, I don't know if it'll be worked out or it's just still subjective, is, if you're riding by someone, we don't have brake lights like a car on our bikes, right? So you could be riding along and someone could all of a sudden be like, oh gosh, I'm pushing too high a power and slow down. And then then you bump into that zone a little bit and the light turns red, which is what it does when you're within 12 meters. And then you have to make the decision, real quick. Oh shoot, do I need to go around now? Or was that just a quick blip and I can back out? So I don't know if I'm making sense, but I
No,
think that,
I think the dynamics of racing, and this has been happening the entire time, by the way. This is not just some magical thing now that we have an identification of when it's happening. It's been happening.
right,
There have to be, like, in the future, there's got to be a way to adapt a protocol to where every single athlete on course is given 100 seconds of time, negative time, to where you like can go in and out of the zone just based on
right,
normal course or climbing or aid stations. And so then they have a cutoff, right? And then once the refs can, and if the refs are right alongside you, they can usually tell, like, well, they've been in the red for about a minute straight. Obviously, they're not trying to back out. I think there's a lot of
right,
leniency, and
right,
but it gives the refs the tool to say, I've seen that red light on for a while. You've seen it red on for a
yes,
while, and you did not try to back out of it for a second. This is worthy of a penalty. And
I agree.
yeah, so I think even climbs, like, they needed to delineate zones. And I said this on a previous podcast, and I think James, one of the owners of Race Ranger, messaged me. He said, "Yeah, it'd be great if there was like yellow tape, the start of a climb, at the end of a climb, where we know we're probably going to bunch up a little bit, because bunching in a climb when everyone's going like 6-7 miles an hour,
Right.
it's not really a benefit, but obviously it should eventually start to stretch out as you kind of get back out of that accordion." And I think that's really all
Totally.
we're looking for as athletes. I've never ridden a race where there's sustained climbs where athletes just don't bunch up, and refs literally just leave until the top of the hill. And then once we
Yeah.
get back into a position where we could have aero benefits, then they're like, all right, back on, spread it out, get back to legal. And I think that that's probably still racing, because let's say everyone has to climb at that same gap and sort themselves out and hit the brakes, sit up. That's not
Right.
racing. You're racing for a different purpose, and that's just to stay legit in the rules, not for position or energy or finish. So anyways, that's kind of my position on it, and as I think about it and talk to athletes.
Yeah, I mean, you made some really good points. And I think that goes back to it being like, okay, there's always still going to be some subjective analysis going on during the race with this, but hopefully it just makes it, like you said, like a really obvious case. It makes it more obvious. And also for the athletes, like if you're seeing a red light the whole time, and even if you're not getting caught, like, like
Yeah,
that's not what you're supposed to be doing. And so I just think it's good for a little more integrity in the sport in general, and non-drafting. And I think it's great. So I'm glad I'm around for the times of the race ranger.
great tool. Did you use any of the new hydration on course from Mortal Hydration?
So I did not because I have any issue with it or preference either way. Um, I didn't, just because again, I was trying to keep it like a pretty solid
Practice.
plan. And I think once you start, and during the run, I did start taking in some of the Gatorade and the Mortal a little bit, because I was like, oh, am I a little low on salt? But other than that, try to keep all, you know what I mean? Like keep it pretty structured. Yeah, I
They
mean, the
had
second,
they had both on course
everything.
still.
What'd you say?
They had Gatorade and Mortal still.
Yes, they did. And I'm
Okay.
not really exactly sure why. It wasn't Gatorade Endurance, it was normal Gatorade.
Well, I
Um,
think Gatorade Endurance is gone. I think that
yeah,
product is just eliminated. So I think Gatorade is still, seems like it's there, but if you want actual higher quantity of sodium, I think you've got to lean into Mortal.
I agree. And I've tried their packets, like just as like a sample or whatever. And I mean, for me, I like, yeah, I'm not, again, I don't have a preference either way. And I
Yeah,
think
we're not
just,
we're not slamming them.
Yeah, I just think we need some sort of electrolyte drink out there.
Yeah.
And so that's great, whatever it is. And then, like I said, if I want to carry along the precision hydration tabs to just have a really like know exactly what I have, then you just carry something with you. Um,
Did you take salt pills, or did you like take one of those dissolving ones and just full froth it in your mouth?
full froth. So I didn't, okay, so I should say on the bike, I had the tabs because then you can put that in water.
Yeah,
And in the run, I took the like capsules.
the salt pills.
Um, yeah, and that, I mean, the run I definitely wasn't as exact, but we all know if it's way more important to nail a plan on the bike. And then, I was trying to do, use the aid, you just use the aid stations on the run. So I was trying to do like 2 gels an hour, maybe had a little more again. In the run, my little plan I'm proud of kind of started dwindling out a little bit, but
I think
I
everyone's like that. You're like a little Coke, a little this, a little that, maybe a
yeah, I'm
chip.
like,
I don't know.
ugh. It never has. And that's what I mean. Like it was a weird heat there because I mean, every aid station when I dumped water on my head was like the best feeling I've had all day.
And then immediately was gone. This two
Yep.
steps out of the aid station.
Yep. And then I was like, oh, and then and that's what I mean. Like it's just so up and down the whole time. And I'm just laughing because it's like a crazy experience, but it's pretty cool being out there. And especially in hindsight, like to be like, oh wow, we all did that. Ooh, that was a thing.
I think that's the best part about a race is it's not like even sometimes the result, if it works out being super awesome, that's great. But just the fact that you've like subjected yourself to such mental anguish and
Yes.
levels of suffering that you haven't felt and you've forgotten of, and you find
Yes.
ways to navigate all these fucked up things that come in your brain. And I think that's really like that finishing, like just absorbing all of that bullshit you just went through is like why I love a finish line of an Ironman.
I totally agree. Couldn't have said it better. And when you said like the things we do with our mind, I will say you said a couple things that I can really relate to. The things we do with our mind and just kind of forgetting the pain. Like I was like, oh yeah, even if I was feeling better on the run, it's still 26 miles and it's
It's still
still
bad.
very painful and you forget. And I was just had to be like, okay, you felt this before, you just kind of forgot. And then another thing I was telling to myself, like, you have to switch things in your mind. When I saw there was 10 mile, it was like mile 16. My first reaction was like, oh my God, I have a 10-mile run left. Like if you do a 10-mile run at home, that's a solid run. So I switched it immediately and I was like, no, think of it as a percentage of the run that you have left. And even more importantly, a percentage of this entire race. Like you've made it this far out of 140.6 miles, you only have 10 left. So I was like forcing myself just to think um, that last 10 miles. And mind tricks do help. So just figured I'd share that one.
No, it's good. It's the last 10 miles of a Ironman marathon are all mind tricks because even,
Is
we've talked to people who win the race and they're like, I've never wanted to die and quit something so badly, even though I was winning.
It's totally true. And that's what makes it an awesome experience. So wait, when are you doing a full again?
I'll do Challenge Roth.
Oh yeah, okay. I knew that. But
I
that's
it's been
cool.
it's been a minute. I don't think I've done one since 20 Mallorca with Jackson, whenever that was. I don't
Yeah. So you and I are
20,
kind of on a similar.
yeah. And even then, like I blacked out in the last 6 miles or something on the run. I didn't remember it. But
Sorry, it's not funny. I just
no, it happens. Like I was just
it
teeter
happens.
teeter tottering into oblivion, and it just succumbed to the elements. It was terrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm in a. It's like I had to have those 2 years, these past 2 years, where I just kind of had to figure things out again. And
Yep.
this year for sure, I'm more motivated. I want to get back into feeling like I can handle longer distance. So obviously, watching you get through it and do well and stay strong, and the other athletes that we're friends with, it's always inspiring. So thank you.
Totally. Well, yeah, for sure. And then hopefully this chat, things I've said, you can remember when you do yours as
I
like,
will.
this is supposed to be painful, got to do mind tricks, everything like that. So,
Yeah, I don't wish it was rainy. I don't wish it was, all tailwind the whole time. I want some
yeah,
some shit to work through.
Yep. And in races, there's certain races where for some reason I'm always just feeling like it's like the Hunger Games. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
this feels like the hunger. I don't know why I think that. But I was thinking that out on the bike course this past weekend, like just when the winds picked up, you had to another thing, you got to keep your head up in these and not get too much in the zone because there's conditions and
People.
people and things around you. So it requires this kind of like laser focus, which good practice for other things in life. So,
How about Texas as a venue? Did you enjoy that?
yes and no. I mean, you kind of have to look at it of, I'm not going to wish for anything different because that's what made that race, and that was a good experience overall. Um, I think the community in the Woodlands, the volunteers, just the triathlon and running community and cycling community in general there is so supportive of the race. So many volunteers out there, so many spectators. That's what I love about Ironman Texas. And I will say, yeah, the bike course you can have to dodge around some things. That being said, I mean, having it on a controlled loop on a completely closed tollway without cars is something that I think is cool and good
Yeah.
for the sport. So I will say I'll focus on that positive of the bike. And then again, the swim. I mean, we didn't talk about that, but I felt like I was on the moon. Luckily I was with people. I was totally getting disoriented. But at the end of the day, that's my issue. It's a pretty straightforward swim course. Like you're not going to have waves. It gets a little
Canal.
choppy at times, but it's nothing crazy. Like, it's a pretty straightforward course, which I think people like. Keeps the stress down a little bit.
Yeah. So you might do, well, it sounds like Boulder in June is going to be your recovery period between now and then building up fitness again. So overall, yeah, I think Lesley, this is going to be a super fun year. I know your personal woes here and there, and I think that pushing through all of that has been really great for you. I mean, look at you.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That's another thing I think, your mind goes to during racing. And again, we'll say especially Ironman since that's what I just went through, but I think any racing is it really is about just pushing through things and doing hard things. And it sounds cliche, but it's just such a metaphor for life that sometimes things aren't perfect, but you just kind of keep pushing forward, one foot in front of the other, and give yourself some credit that you can push through hard things and things will go okay. And
Yeah.
it's a little my TED talk for the podcast, but I was kind of thinking that during the race. So I think it's
No, that's all wisdom. And I think we all get too caught up in things that don't really make a difference. And it sounds like no matter what, an Ironman is going to show you what you need to work on to make a difference.
yes, 100%. Well put, as always.
Thanks. Well, Lesley, thanks for coming on. We'll probably won't see you for a minute. Actually, I'm signed up for Boulder half distance, so I
Oh,
hope to come out there and give her a race.
okay. I
And
can be
yeah,
your homestay. So,
oh, maybe.
logistics.
All right. Well, in the meantime, let's keep posting some good stuff. Show us about your life. Follow Lesley on Instagram. She always posts the most hilarious cat videos about Pinky the cat. I need to get some more of that. And then Lesley, good job at Ironman Texas. Thank you for
Thanks,
kicking
Nick.
ass.
It was good to catch up.
All right, we'll talk again real soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.